Welcome to the Style and Grace podcast, maintaining mental health and tackling real life issues, honesty and compassion. Where style meets substance and grace meets real life experiences. Hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode of the Style and Grace podcast. I'm your host, Whitney Victoria, and I am so glad that you are here with me on today. A few episodes ago, I talked about the beauty of starting over. Now, I was coming back from Georgia and I decided to just listen to some podcasts. And I don't know what made me click on the Mel Robbins podcast, but I'm so glad I did. And y'all, I love me some Mel Robbins. And so on this episode of her podcast, she sat down with Rich Roll, who was a New York Times bestseller author, an ultra endurance athlete, and the host of one of the top podcasts in the world. And y'all, his story blew me away. Rich has reinvented his life 3 different times, from being an alcoholic who could barely keep his life together, to being an overweight lawyer who could hardly walk up a flight of stairs, to becoming one of the fittest men alive. But what stuck with me the most wasn't just what he accomplished, it was how he kept choosing to start over and over and over again. And listening to that episode took me back to a conversation I had with my dad a few months ago, and one that I think about often, especially when I feel or start to feel like I'm behind. So a few months ago, I'm gonna take you back. I called my dad and I was feeling a little discouraged because I don't know if you've ever had those moments where you look around and think, man, when is it going to be my turn? When are things going to finally fall into place? I was really having one of those days. So I asked my dad, I was like, Dad, how old were you when you started over? Like when things began to turn around for you? Because I remember him telling me a story, how he was really like down to nothing. Like he really had to start himself over. And he was like, I was around, my late 30s, 36, 37, 38. And he was like, that's when I started, from nothing. That was the time his life really began to shift. Things began to happen for him. He was like, that's when I got my house. That's when things started to align. And I was working a job that allowed me to take care of myself, to rebuild. And, that's when life started to look different. And it really gave me chills because I'm in that age range now. And hearing that reminded me that starting over isn't failure. Sometimes it's just the beginning of everything. And my dad told me, like, you can rebuild your life from the ground up. Like, it's not too late. And when I paired that conversation with what Rich Roll was talking about, it just made me realize how often we tell ourselves that our story is supposed to look a certain way by a certain age. But that's not really how life works, right? Let's talk about these timestamps we put on our lives because, that one hits home for me. I've been guilty of saying things like, by 25, I should be here. By 30, I should have this. By 35, I should have it all figured out. And when I look around and you see people buying homes, traveling, building businesses, and living the kind of life that looks like success, you can start comparing your timeline to theirs. And that comparison leads to frustration, burnout, and disappointment because now you're measuring your progress against somebody else's path. And here's what I learned. You're not behind. You're just being prepared. Sometimes God is holding certain things until you're ready. Not because he's punishing you, but because he's just protecting us, right? Every delay, every detour, every disappointment might actually just be redirection. So if you feel like you're behind, take a breath. Maybe this is just your season of setup. Ooh, that was good. Hold on. Maybe this is just your season of setup. That was for me, y'all. Now let's get into the real. What does it actually take to reinvent yourself? Because we see it online all the time. Start fresh, pivot, change your life. But how do you actually do that when you feel stuck, broke, overwhelmed, or uncertain? Here's what I've learned and what I'm personally walking through right now. You have permission to begin again. Like I said before in the previous podcast episodes, it's okay to start over. There's beauty in starting over. You don't need anyone's approval. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to decide, I am not staying stuck here. Starting over is powerful because it means you're giving yourself another chance. Listen, stop fighting the ending. It's making room for your new beginning. Sometimes we hold on so tightly to what was that we block what can be. Y'all, that was good. Hold on. Let me say it again. Let me say it again. Sometimes we hold on so tightly to what was that we block what can be. I've learned that the ending of something that's a relationship, a job, a season, or a dream is often the beginning of something even better. Also, be patient and be kind with yourself. Rebuilding takes time. You're not going to have it all together overnight. There are days I feel strong and hopeful. Then there are days when I feel like, ooh, I'm taking 10 steps back. But I got to remind myself, I am still moving forward. Also, listen to that inner voice, the one that says, this isn't it. Don't ignore your intuition. If something feels off, it probably is. Discomfort is a sign of direction. Sometimes the frustration you feel is just a sign that you've outgrown the old version of your life. Y'all, I ain't gonna hold y'all, but I'm dropping bars tonight. So make sure y'all write this down. Also, take one small action towards your new chapter. You don't have to overhaul your life overnight. Start small, clean your space, write a new plan, pray, ask for help. Movement creates momentum. Movement creates momentum. Lastly, reinvention doesn't mean becoming someone new. It's uncovering who you've always been. You're not lost. You're evolving. Sometimes we go through life trying to find ourselves, but the truth is we are already ourselves. We just have to remove the fear, the doubt, and the expectations to see it clearly. I'll be honest. I'm still healing from putting those timelines on my life, y'all. I still have moments where I look around and think, shouldn't I be doing this by now? But I'm learning that everything happens in divine timing. I'm learning that what's for me is still for me, even if it's delayed. I'm learning to be grateful for the in-between seasons because that's where the growth happens. That's where God does his best work, when nobody's watching, when you're quietly rebuilding, when you're just trusting him day by day. Y'all, I listened to a young lady giving her testimony about her starting a new job, and she was without a job for about 5 months. And she talked about just, and she showed, applications being denied after denial, after denial, after denial, after denial. Mind you, she moved out of her apartment, bought a house, started her business, and then a few months later lost her job. And then now she's just saying, listen, y'all, she said, y'all, I feel like, God is in an overcompensating season. He's going to overcompensate for the last 6 months. And that it blessed me because she also said that you don't take a break from believing in God. She said that, even though she was, those 5 months without a job, she had opportunities. Basically, she showed her account being at zero, almost in the negative. But even in that, she was able to go to New York Fashion Week. I think she was sponsored to go to New York Fashion Week. God still sustained her, even with her account looking like that, right? And she said, you don't get to take a break from believing in God. And even when she was going through that, she still believed. And she sat in her car, gave her testimony about how she did not have that job for 5 months, but she sat in that car before she walked in her new job today. And that thing blessed me. So if you're listening right now and you feel like you're starting over, maybe it's your career, your finances, your relationship, your confidence. I want you to know you are not behind at all. You're being rebuilt. You are exactly where you're supposed to be at this time. And before we close, I want to leave you with a few journal prompts that you can use during this season of starting over. Here is the first journal prompt. What part of my life feels out of alignment? And what might God be asking me to release? The second journal prompt. What would my next chapter look like if I stopped being afraid to start over? The third journal prompt. What lesson did my last setback teach me? Take some time with these. Be honest with yourself. Sometimes clarity comes when we slow down enough to reflect. And I'm also going to put these journal prompts in the show notes as well, okay? So listen, I just want today to be a reminder that it's not too late to reinvent yourself. You're not behind. You're being prepared. And like my dad said, sometimes starting from nothing is the best thing that can ever happen to you. You just never know You can rebuild your life you can rebuild your life from a stronger foundation with wisdom, faith, and experience guiding you this time. If this episode encouraged you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who might need the reminder and that it's never too late to start over. And I'll link the Mel Robbins episode with Rich Roll in the show notes so you can listen to it yourself. Y'all, it is very powerful. And if you haven't heard, y'all, I am hosting the Grace Gathering January 17th, 2026. Listen, live podcast session. We have some great vendors you can shop from, connections, networking, such a great space, y'all. And I have so many surprises that are going to happen during the show, and I cannot wait to see you all there. Listen, until next time, remember, grace is for the growing seasons, and your story isn't over yet. It is just the beginning. Here is where style meets substance and grace meets real life experiences. Until next time.